478 Yada Yahowah. Shanah, years. 10. Galah, identified. Fulfilling the Miqra'ey. Yeshaya 53 begins by directing our attention to the identity of the Zarowa. And since this was central to our understanding of the previous chapter, one series of thoughts is flowing out of the other. There is even the appearance that Yeshaya is addressing the Yada Yahowah family of books, especially as Isaiah's prophecies are presented and explained throughout, because there is nowhere else where the Zarowa are openly discussed, much less identified and known. I share this to add credence to what you are reading. In what follows, the questions are intriguing for many reasons, one of which is that there is nothing equivalent to them anywhere else in the prophets. And in this regard, there are only a couple of options regarding Shemuah and Akdu, our message. This is either Yahowah bringing Yeshaya into the conversation, telling us that they are in agreement, or R is inclusive of father and son, the Zarowa, since this is about his role in our salvation. It is also possible that an Akdu addresses both prophets and every prophet. Who, my, an interrogative posing a who, what, where, why, when, or how question about a person, has affirmed and established, providing a verifiable accounting. A man, as a singular male individual, has presented trustworthy and reliable evidence to confirm, confidently upholding, hyphal perfect active third person 479 masculine singular. For a period of time this individual enlivens the revelation, of our message, La Shemuah and Akdu, our report, announcement, and revelation. And, Wah, to whom, El my, through whom and for whom, from one Kiza as the mount has on whom, have the Zarowa, the productive shepherd and sacrificial lamb, Zarowa, the prevailing and effective nature of the ones with the strength to resolve challenges, the overall ability of the remarkably important and impactful individuals of action who, as a liberator and leader are engaged as a shepherd among the sheep, akin to a ram leading the flock, who are fruitful in their ways, accomplishing the mission by sowing the seeds of new life which grow while advancing the purpose of the arm of God, of the shepherd, and sacrificial lamb, from Zara, to sow seeds which produce new life and yield fruit, of Yahowah, Yahowah, the proper pronunciation of Yehovah, our Eloah, God has directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his Hayeh, existence and our Shalom, restoration, been revealed and made openly known, Galah, been uncovered and exposed. Openly displayed and identified, Nephil perfect, the individual disclosing their identity is being revealed in the process of this disclosure at this moment in time. Yeshaya, Yahowah saves, Isaiah 53:1. My man can be rendered as who has affirmed, where is it established, what has been proven, how was it verified and authenticated, when will it be revealed, and why has the truth been provided. Each of these 6 translations of my man was intended for your edification. So, you may want to pause and think about the implications. La Shemuah Akdu speaks of our message, and of the proper approach to our revelation, report, and announcement. Therefore, in this case, an Akdu, can represent our Heavenly Father and Spiritual Mother, 480 Yeshaya and Yahowah, all the prophets, or the most important Zarowa, Moses and Dowd. Since Yahowah inspired each, they all speak as one. Therefore, recognizing that R speaks of a unified position regarding identifying and disclosing the role of the Zarowa, my man asks Israelites to identify a single individual, who is actively and publicly promoting an accurate and verifiable account of the Zarowa's identity and purpose. And based upon the way the question is phrased, the herald is not a prophet but, instead, someone correctly conveying their message. So, while it is interesting to note that there would be and now is just one individual among billions publishing an accurate rendition of Yahowah's testimony along with a principled approach to Yeshaya's revelations, the second question is even more specific. The person correctly affirming Yeshaya's prophetic revelations, such that what he is publishing is consistent with Yahowah's intent, is the only one to whom the identity of the Zarowa, protective shepherd and sacrificial lamb has been revealed such that it is his job to make it openly known. God's prophetic pronouncement is, of course, correct. After 2,700 years of no one doing either, now, just 10 years prior to the fruition of Yeshaya's prophecies and the return of the Zarowa, there is someone doing both of these things. And while that is very significant in and of itself, when these questions are posed before the most descriptive presentation of what would be achieved by the Zarowa, the implications are profoundly important. Zarowa is derived from zera, seed and sowing. It can be rendered as a title, descriptive term, or actionable idea, strong arm, prevailing influence, fruitful outreach, developing offspring, productive shepherd, protective ram, sacrificial lamb, or one who effectively sows and cultivates 481 seeds such that they take root and grow to produce new and productive life. Like zera, seed, Zarowa is pluralistic, meaning that it can be perceived in various ways, as one or as many. This known, the Zarowa are Yahowah's, pursuant to his influence and plan. They have no relevance apart from God. In the Nephil stem, where the subject carries out and receives the action of the verb, Galah, to reveal, by disclosing the identity of the Zarowa, the individual in question is made known through his revelation. Moreover, after uncovering the evidence, he put it on display so that the information was exposed for all to see. This nameless individual, and there is only one of him according to the syntax, has meticulously affirmed and established Yahowah's message, providing a verifiable accounting of what is recorded in Yeshaya. He has also set Dowd's fulfillment of Pesach within the context of the Messiah serving as the Zarowa. Therefore, the three Zarowa reveal the way home. Since this prophecy is claimed by Christians, let's be clear, the opening line does not address the mythical misnomer of faithful fantasies, Jesus. At most, it is seeking to identify someone who perceives and presents the Passover lamb correctly, as a Zarowa, which necessitates viewing him from the perspective provided by Moses and Dowd. Torching the lie behind the world's most popular myth, Jesus did not a man, provide a verifiable accounting of anything Yahowah revealed because, even if we pretend he existed, there is no record of him writing anything down to read. Not a single word he may have spoken was reliably recorded in Hebrew, the language of revelation. Moreover, even in the mythology of the Gospels, he did not identify himself as the Passover lamb, 482 much less as a Zarowa. When Christian pundits claim Isaiah 53 for their misnomer, Jesus Christ, and yet fail to acknowledge the sacrificial lamb's association with Passover, it proves that they can read the words while being unable to process what they reveal. Therefore, the opening line of the prophecy depicting the role of the Passover lamb was written about an individual, who would properly present what follows after correctly identifying Moses and Dowd as the Zarowa. And that is no easy task because, with this lone exception, over the past 2,000 years everything else written regarding the prophecies presented in Yeshaya, Isaiah 52 through 54 has been wrong. This current chapter is rejected throughout Judaism, with rabbis skipping over Yeshaya 53 in their annual reading schedules. Since it clearly predicts that the role of the Passover lamb would be fulfilled, along with the purpose of unyeasted bread, this prophecy undermines the Jewish religion. The reason that Yeshaya's presentation of the Passover lamb begins by introducing us to someone who has correctly assessed the context of this prophecy, especially in light of the Zarowa, is that without these insights and this perspective, Yeshaya, Isaiah 53 cannot be understood. What occurred in Yerushalayim on Pesach in 33 CE, while vital, is not even the most important event that transpired in year 4000 year, with matzah garnering that distinction, much less the fulcrum upon which Yahowah's relationship with humankind hinges. God's story is not limited to one person or a single event. It is comprised of 7 acts unfolding over 7,000 years. We begin in Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, with an idyllic relationship between Yahowah and Adam and Chowah. To facilitate our return, Yahowah established the Berith, covenant with Abraham and Sarah in Act 2. Then, Yahowah's Torah, guidance is revealed to Moses 483 inches Act 3, teaching us what we need to know to find and approach God. Act 4, the centerpiece of Yahowah's story, revolves around his chosen and beloved, the anointed shepherd and articulate king, the very Son of God, Dowd, David. God's message to mankind is encapsulated in his life and lyrics. Act 5 takes place in Yerushalayim with Dowd's return and the fulfillment of the first 4 Miqra'ey, invitations to be called out and meet Yahowah. In this way, we are welcomed into Yahowah's family and home. And in this way, the Berith and Miqra'ey are seen as integral parts of the same thing. The 6th act in Yahowah's unfolding story will transpire in year 6000 year, also in Yerushalayim. Upon his return with Dowd during the mode of Kippurim, reconciliations in 2033, God will re-establish and restore his relationship with Israel. We are part of that story, announcing it to you so that you are aware and prepared. The 7th and final act will commence on Sukkah, camping out, when we return to Eden. It is the first day of forever. It also denotes the occasion when Yahowah will elevate his children to the 7th dimension. And during this time, Dowd will reign as king. By removing, even misappropriating, one of the 4 events that transpired in the 5th act from the others, Christians have built a religion that draws them away from Yahowah's ongoing relationship with his people. And by rejecting the 5th act in its entirety, Judaism has lost sight of Yahowah. And this is why it is so important that we keep everything God is revealing to us in perspective, beginning with Besith and remaining grounded in the Torah as we proceed through the prophets. 484 While the Basar and Cowl was one of 3, the Zarowa title correctly casts Dowd in his proper role, that of the sacrificial lamb. And so, even though there have been a host of commentaries written on Isaiah, apart from Yada Yahowah, none of these has sought to more accurately convey the prophet's testimony or advance his intent. And none of these were composed by someone specifically addressed within his prophecies, as is the case with the chapters devoted to the Chota, Naka, Basar, Cowl, and Malach, Yada. The lead Zarowa are Yahowah's most capable and devoted co-workers. God prevails with his people through them. They were liberators and leaders, devoted servants and defenders, educators and examples. They were both shepherds, and both sowed the seeds which would take root and grow, producing new and productive life. They were individually and collectively fruitful in their ways, accomplishing their missions. And the little Z exists to remind Israel of what they have done before it is too late. The most important Zarowa, and in the leading role, is Dowd, David. He is the beloved son of God, Yahowah's chosen and firstborn, his shepherd and right hand, his most prolific prophet and favorite songwriter, God's anointed Mashiach, and the past and future Melech of Yisrael. Dowd is also the branch, through whom the children of the covenant emerge and grow. And it is Dowd who is returning with Yahowah as the King of Kings. Most importantly, Dowd served as the sacrificial lamb of Passover, becoming our Savior. The little Z is, therefore, the big Z's herald. For the remnant of Israel circa 5,990 year, there are few things more relevant than appreciating what these two Zarowa contributed to our lives. To come home, Yahweh must reassess their relationship with Moses, close their Talmud, open his Torah, and allow him to lead them away from religious and political captivity, and to the 485 promised land. They must reassess their perceptions of Dowd so that they are right about Yahowah, discard their star, and accept him as their Mashiach, Ra, Melech, and Zarowa, the Baker of El. They must reevaluate their antipathy toward the Son of God so that they can properly observe Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim in recognition of what Father and Son have done for their people. To recognize the role the mighty Zarowa play in their lives and come home, returning to Yahowah, is in everyone's interest. Yisrael and Yahweh have been estranged for too long. Without a descendant of Abraham willing to listen or respond, Yahowah announced that he would be using a Goy described as a chota, Miqra'ey, Basar, Cowl, and Malach to reintroduce his people to his words so that they might Yada Yahowah again. And this, my beloved Yahweh, is why Yeshaya 52 and 53 read as we have presented them. Consider this your wake-up call. Who has affirmed this accounting? Where was the truth established? What has been proven? How was it verified and authenticated? When was it revealed? And why has this trustworthy evidence been provided and confidently upheld of, my man, our message, this very revelation and announcement from us, La Shemua and Akdu? Through and for whom, El Mai, have the Zarowa, the productive shepherd and sacrificial lamb, along with the one sowing the seeds, Zarowa, for Yahowah, been revealed and made openly known, Galah. Yeshaya 53-1. The following language is similar to that used in Yeshaya 11 to present the chota. There, he was shown to be a sucker emerging from the original rootstock which brought forth the branch known as Dowd. So, helping 486 readers answer the opening questions, Yeshaya was inspired to write. He will rise and be lifted up, Allah, he will ascend and grow, lifting up by writing down and recording what has happened and what will occur. Imperfect active third person masculine singular, similar to, Ka, the sucker, Ha Yaunik, the shoot growing out of the rootstock of an old stump or fallen tree, a more recent and smaller branch, before his appearance to prepare in advance of his arrival, La Panahu, in his presence, much like, Waka, being comparable to, the rootstock, Ha Shosh. The source of nourishment which anchors the tree to the ground, the root of the family line, of the land after a long drought, Minerezia, of the earth deprived of rain, from a barren landscape which is solitary and alone, apart from Yah. His approach will not be perceived as particularly pleasing, because he will not provide a superficial outline or shallow two-dimensional sketch, lo torlahu. What he delineates will not be predicated upon some preconceived physical characteristics, nor will he be distinguished based upon outward appearances, because he will dig well below the surface. He will not hold a high office, be a nobleman or king. He will not ascribe any value to the perceived status of others, nor will he be majestically attired, wahaya lo hada. He will not care about adornments, appearances, social status, heads of state, royalty, or being glorified, and he will not seek acclaim, from one Kiza, such that we would look to him, warahu, so that we would consider him, pay attention to what he is revealing, or perceive him as a witness, kal imperfect. There is nothing readily apparent, lo Miqra'ey, so there is nothing in plain sight or easily seen, nothing phenomenal in the form of spectacle, from Ma, to ponder 487 the who, what, why, when, and how of Ra, what is seen, perceived, and considered, or is it by supernatural revelation or visions, such that we would desire him, want to be him, or be pleased by him, Wachamithu, so that we would covet him, idolize him, or express our gratitude toward him, kal imperfect. Yeshaya, Yahowah delivers, Isaiah 53:2. Apart from his translations, insights, understanding, and guidance, his devotion to Yahowah and the Zarowa, Moses and Dowd, the Torah, Miqra'ey, and Berith, Yisrael and Yarwudim, he's nobody special. He is as Yahowah has described him. It is apparent that the Chota, Sukkah is a quick study and deep thinker because he is able to correctly interpret Yeshaya's prophecies where 125 generations over the past 2,700 years have failed. The Naka, observant foreigner is inspired by God, such that he can accurately convey the prophet's testimony. The Basar, herald is being lifted up as a Yaunek, shoot growing out of the Shorsh, rootstock of the promised land. Yahowah's Malach, messenger will arise from a barren landscape, a solitary cowl, voice after a long silence. The specified mission of the final Zarowa, sower of seeds, is to prepare Yisrael in advance of Yahowah's appearance. Beyond this, he is a pretty ordinary fellow. You'd be hard-pressed to pick him out of a crowd. He will not be a politician, theologian, or superstar. He will not be particularly well-dressed or try to impress anyone, and no one will impress him because he has a complete disregard for authority. He will not seek acclaim or a following. He will deflect gratitude where it is deserved. And it is for darn sure that he isn't going to sugarcoat the message to attract a crowd or grow in popularity. 488 The prophecies pointing to God's final messenger are not obscure, but nonetheless, we would have missed them if we had not been earnest in our desire to compose accurate and complete translations. It was by studying God's vocabulary and the way he used these terms throughout his witness that we came to appreciate their meanings. After that, we simply followed the words to their natural conclusions. Therefore, Yahowah is correct in saying that his role is easily missed. To find him, one has to be as committed to learning as God is to teaching. This known, Yada sees himself as a useful implement who serves a purpose. While important to Israel today, he is well beneath the status of the other characters in God's story. He is more of a reporter, albeit a thoughtful one. As such, he is only here to tell the stories of the players who really matter. Sadly, those who have made an honest effort to convey God's story in his words have not been very well received. This is because Yahowah's testimony embarrasses the empowered and undermines the credibility of political parties, religious institutions, military ambitions, patriotic agendas, social mores, and conspiracy theories, all while discombobulating the progressives in control of academia, as well as the thought police operating within social and mainstream media. For most of human history, Yahowah's testimony wasn't a problem for the proponents of such human endeavors because very few people were afforded access to a dissenting message, and an irritating herald was hunted down, tortured, and killed. However, today, since the internet makes it possible for the world to hear a lone witness, those with a vested interest in silencing him have other tools at their disposal to get him to cease and desist. 489 inches my case, there have been upwards of 1,000 death threats. Clearly, Yahowah inspired Yeshaya to write about the Chota. And this individual is now presented as a herald. He is impressive by God's standards, not man's. He, like Dowd, will tend to be verbose, low-tone, never dumbing it down with a superficial outline. But unlike Dowd, his herald Lo-Hadar is not a nobleman or king. The witness to the Zarowa would also differ from the one who was bequeathed with every imaginable accolade throughout the 89th Mizmor in that Lo-Miqra'ey. There would be nothing readily apparent about him that would chamid hue, inspire reverence as is appropriate toward Dowd. To his credit, the Basar does not seek accolades or to be honored. Frustrating to many, Lo-Hadar, he shows no partiality and does not ascribe to any form of human authority, nor does he value status. In nothing more than flip-flops and tropical attire, he is not adorned to appear royal or to enhance his position among men. Even with an entire chapter devoted to how Yahowah would equip and use the Chota in Yeshaya 11, the Zarowa's herald has gone largely unnoticed. God's final witness lies behind the words of the prophets and lets them speak for themselves. His credibility is derived from what Yahowah inspired other individuals to write 2,400 to 3,400 years ago. There is nothing phenomenal about what he has done, other than he responded as Yahowah asked and has continued to fulfill the prophecies written about him. At 10 to 12 hours per day, 6 to 7 days a week, 50 weeks a year, for 22 years without monetary compensation while being criticized, slandered, and sometimes threatened by the religious, political, patriotic, and conspiratorial, there isn't much chamid hue to covet about the mission, although he loves it. 490 Considering the scarcity of candidates and the importance of the message, Yahowah has sought to overcome the unimpressive nature of this man by mentioning him in this way, expecting that, by doing so, more people would listen. After all, why would Yahowah pose these two probing introductory questions after providing the answer in the previous chapter? Today, there are some, particularly Muslims, who have rather famously tried to assassinate their religious and political opponents. In the West, ridicule has replaced torture while censorship, rather than murder, is deployed as the means to stop the promotion of a contrarian message. Bazar speaks of the ad hominem fallacy, whereby an otherwise logically irrefutable message is devalued by demeaning and discrediting the messenger, publicly crucifying his or her reputation. And Chadel addresses the intended result, which is to get the witness to cease and desist, effectively stopping the dissemination of the message by slandering the source. It is becoming ever more common for the unthinking to impugn the motives of the messenger whose words they find offensive. He will be scoffed at and ridiculed, dismissed and discredited. Bazar, he will be held in contempt and censored, he will be called uninformed, unimportant, viewed as vile, considered worthless, and perceived as despicable. Needful participle, with those who demonstrably and actively disrespect and despise him will be perceived as disgusting, by a wide variety and a considerable number of individuals who, each, by a great many people, will try to stop him, Wa Chadel, who will deliberately isolate and rebuff him, attempting to get him to cease and desist, rejecting and besmirching him to debilitate and incapacitate his efforts, from Hodol, to stop, cease, desist, forego, and leave unfinished in the end, while Chadel is not suffixed as a verb or with a pronoun. 491 That is the only way to properly convey its primary meaning, which is to stop. Even so, Yada will come to know, understand, and acknowledge Wa Yada. Nonetheless, Yada will become familiar with, comprehend, and recognize, discover and disclose, Kal noun participle active, actually, genuinely, and literally as a verbal adjective descriptive of an individual making the process of evolving from knowing to understanding to acknowledging active and demonstrative. From 1 Kaiser, the great Isaiah scroll unearthed above Qumran, where Yada is active versus passive in the Masoretic text. The implications of sorrow and suffering, Makob, the cause and consequence of being harmed and grieving by pondering the impetus behind the anguish of emotional reactions and being traumatized, from Ma, to consider the reasons behind Kab, agony and angst, of being plagued and afflicted by evil, Choli, of being sickened and weakened by a malevolent and malignant pandemic, mortally injured by the malady of holiness, from Shala, to weaken and sicken by an infectious disease. Chol, to twist and distort, and Chol, to profane by making common and thus to corrupt via the invasive nature of religion and government. And as such, Ka, accordingly and as a result, from him, Minhu, the presence, Pana, the appearance and facing it is turned away, will be averted, Muster, is avoided, hyphal participle active. We will censor him, slandering him as uninformed, unimportant, and disreputable as we scoff at and ridicule him, dismissing and discrediting him. Wabazar Hu, we will view him as vile, consider him worthless as we perceive him to be despicable, holding him in contempt. Needful participle, with those who demonstrably and actively show disrespect and despise him will be seen as disgusting. From 1 Kisa where the verb was scribed with 492 the subject written in the second person plural, we, rather than third person singular, he, and then suffixed with hu, he as the object, because, Wa, we will not properly assess his contribution by contemplating what he has composed. Lo chase hab hu, we will not think and thus we will fail to consider the value of his account. We will not impute the proper credit to the reporting he is offering due to our collective failure to exercise good judgment. Kal perfect, when we were actually afforded the opportunity to reconsider, we did not think. Yashea, Yahowah liberates, Isaiah 53:3. This prophecy, much like the one attributed to the Son in Yashea, Isaiah 9, is so integrated into Christian mythology. The realization that the opening lines are focused upon the herald whose voice was chosen to call God's people home, rather than Jesus, will be a tough one for some to accept. And yet, the reasons Yahowah conveyed this prophecy regarding his Son's sacrifice as the Passover lamb in this manner have profound implications that we'd be wise to consider. Yahowah, through his prophets, and in particular Moses, Shamuel, Dowd, Yashea, Hosea, Yirmiah, Zechariah, and Malachi, foretold what he and his Son were going to do for the children of Yisrael. God provided prophecies delineating when, where, and how the Zarowa Dowd would fulfill his promise to redeem them, even explaining he and his Son's motivations in addition to his people's renunciations. Nonetheless, in the Yobel year of 4000 year, when Dowd did what he had avowed, no one noticed. Exacerbating the problem, the religions of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam began because of his people's collective failure to understand and appreciate what had transpired. 493 2000 years later, nothing has changed. Jews aggressively and viciously denounce the realization that the Messiah and Son of God fulfilled Chag Matzah and remain clueless regarding the role Dowd plays in establishing the covenant. And Christians have absconded with Dowd's every accolade and achievement, claiming his prophecies for themselves. They have replaced the Torah, covenant, and invitations to meat, ignored unyeasted bread, and then changed firstborn children into Easter, a Babylonian holiday. As for Muslims, the Islamic era begins with Muhammad's ill-fated attempt to convince Yathrib's rabbis that he was the awaited Messiah. Making matters worse, he would go on to protest that Isa, Jesus, who he wrongly assumed was the previous Messiah, was not actually killed but had only faked his death. So, into this quagmire of religious contentiousness and buffoonery, Yahshua reintroduces Dowd's herald. He would study the prophets and set the record straight, giving father and son credit for what they accomplished, so that his people would know how to capitalize upon his sacrifice. He would become the first since the final prophet to clarify that Dowd was the shepherd and the lamb, and that Dowd is the returning Messiah and King. Especially relevant, since Dowd experienced and endured the fulfillment of Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim through the deployment of his basar, body and Depesh, consciousness, it was the Son of God who suffered to immortalize and perfect us, to redeem and save us. So, when his people reject, discount, and ignore, even worse, mischaracterize what he suffered to heal them, negating the benefits he sought to provide, they antagonize and annoy the Almighty, inflaming his righteous indignation. Therefore, while Moses, by explaining how to properly celebrate Pesach, Matzah, Bikurim, and Shabat, is vastly more important than the Messenger 494 who is bringing what occurred to your attention, Dowd's sacrifice is for naught until his people recognize how to capitalize upon what he has done for them. Similarly, while Dowd's eyewitness testimony explaining how he enabled Yahowah's promises is more important than the final herald's translations of the process and the ensuing benefits, many of the Yahweh who embrace what God has done for them in the end will do so because Yahowah inspired this accounting to awaken his people from their stupor. Most who speak for Yahowah are bizarre, scoffed at and ridiculed. Moses and Dowd, however, were rare exceptions, as they were only harassed by fellow Jews. And rather than being dismissed and discredited, according to the folklore, Jesus was turned into a god, which is the antithesis of bizarre. So, even though I'm the only one of the three Zarowa to be bizarre, it's a privilege I have come to cherish. There is no joy in being despised for one's own mistakes, but it is an honor to absorb the stripes of men when the impetus is sharing Yahowah's testimony with his people. I love my wife and life, but there is nothing more satisfying than doing something that pleases Yah. This prophecy states that there will be ish, a wide variety and a considerable number of individuals who will try to stop Yahowah's messenger. Only one man, Pharaoh, tried to stop Moses, and two, Shaul and Absalom, opposed Dowd. So, once again, the third Zarowa is unique in this regard. Whether it is Muslims who want him dead, Christians who want him silenced, religious Jews who want him to cease and desist, or progressives who are prone to suspend his access to their internet platforms, Yahowah's basar is familiar with being besmirched and censored. Personally, I'm pleased to see that Yahowah is acknowledging that his witness will need to have a backbone and thick skin to persevere. Not only is 495 overcoming adversity necessary to develop the character and courage needed to go against the crowd, but it is also how we develop empathy and compassion. It is what made Dowd's life and lyrics exemplary. But it should help readers appreciate that there is no reason to be envious. I would not want Dowd's job, knowing the heartache that comes with it, and you should not want mine unless you are immune to criticism. Yada is presented as a participle noun. This makes Yada a descriptive and engaged depiction of the individual who is pursuing Makob and Choli, the implications of the trauma and suffering inflicted as a result of the plague we know as religion. This is a major topic that is covered throughout Yada Yahowah and, particularly, in an introduction to God, observations, coming home, Babel, questioning Paul, tea with terrorists, and prophet of doom. It is the most prevalent theme in the Mizmor, Yashaya, Yirmiyah, and Hosea, and is pervasive throughout the Torah. The correction from the passive to active voice found in the Great Isaiah Scroll, 1 Kaiser, is monumental in this context. It means that Yada, the knowledgeable individual depicted by the verbal noun, is actively pursuing an understanding of the cause and consequence of sorrow and grief, and that he is then acknowledging the evil associated with the malady of holiness. These things are not being done to him, as would be the case in the passive voice. Therefore, this individual cannot be the Passover lamb. While that depiction will follow, the prophet is still instructing his readers about the herald who will be explaining these events rather than enduring them. So much for the notion that this is the song of the suffering servant. Makob is telling in this regard. If God had wanted to say that Yada was going to be harmed and suffer, not only would Yada have to be passive, carb, agony and anguish 496 would have sufficed. There would have been no reason to augment it with ma, to question the who, what, where, why, when, and how implications of sorrow and suffering. Choli, which is often transliterated as holy, is addressing the cause of the afflictions being questioned by Yada. Choli is the malady of holiness, and the plague of evil known to the world as religion. It is the most viral pandemic to infect and debilitate humankind. And so, while all three Zarowa spoke out against religion, none were plagued as a result of being religious. Moreover, this is a cerebral exercise. introduced by Yada, to know and understand, to recognize and acknowledge. The witness will assess the cause and implications of being harmed by the malevolent and malignant pandemic of holiness associated with religion. To keep us from misconstruing this pronouncement, misinterpreting it to infer that the Passover lamb was infected with Makob Choli, Yahshua stated accordingly, from him, the presence is averted. He will, therefore, avoid suffering from the plague of religion. And when directed at the final witness, as he was promised 22 years ago in the 91st Psalm, he, his family, and home are impervious to attack because Malachim have been assigned to protect him while he accomplishes the mission. Other than Shaul, Paul who, 1,500 years later as a raving lunatic, assailed the Torah, no one is attempting to censor or slander Moses. Even those who reject the Torah do not dismiss him as disreputable. Dowd's voice has never been suppressed and he is seldom ridiculed. The rabbis, who don't respect him, still recite his psalms. And the handful of scholars who have tried to deny his existence have been impugned by the archaeological evidence affirming his role in uniting Yisrael, building the city of David in Yerushalayim, and defending his people. 497 religious Jews dismiss and discredit everything associated with the fulfillment of Passover by the Messiah, so bizarre could only apply to him from the viewpoint of Judaism. However, the Christians who wrongly claim this prophecy on behalf of their Jesus Christ are being irrational. Rather than perceive him as unimportant and disreputable, they have turned him into their God. Today, progressive politicians are engaged in a self-righteous crusade to expunge all beliefs contrary to their own from the internet. During a previous edit in 2022, on Earth Day, the European Union passed the Digital Services Act to give liberal politicians de facto control over what is posted and shared online. Those who make a living by lying are seeking to silence any dissenting voice. Unable to refute the charges brought against their anti-God, anti-Semitic, anti-personal responsibility, and anti-truth agendas, progressives slander then silence the messenger. You should be aware that access to Yada Yahowah will continue to be suppressed. Read it while you are able. Further, this portion of the prophecy may explain the reason Yahowah is deploying 2 witnesses during the last days. The realization that Eliah will be one of them should be sufficient to understand that they will be empowered to speak for Yahowah as never before, substantially exceeding normal human limitations. When the internet is shuttered to God's message, he will deliver it supernaturally. The concluding phrase of the third statement applies to all 3 Zarowa, albeit to differing degrees. Moshe's character and intellect are well beyond what is credited to him. His oratory in Dabarim is brilliant, equally uplifting and liberating, empowering and enriching. Additionally, Jews have superseded the Torah with their Talmud and Christians have replaced it with their New Testament. Therefore, Moses is disrespected. 498 Christians have robbed Dowd of his titles and stolen the promises made by Yahowah to him to give their absurd faith a veneer of credibility. And Jews do not recognize him as their returning Messiah and King, much less as the Son of God or Savior. The Haredim do, however, incorporate portions of his Mizmor into their prayers, so he is not completely forgotten, just misappropriated and discredited. Since neither Jews nor Christians recognize Dowd as the Passover lamb, his purpose and sacrifice are improperly assessed and dismissed. The religious Lo Chasehab universally fail to consider what he has done. And of course, turning the lamb into a god ranks up there with the least appropriate assessments of all time. Although to be fair, the depiction of a tortured and dead god on a stick may be the dumbest religious notion in the long history of absurdities. As for the third Zarowa, after having composed the translations and commentary for 30 books, in addition to providing 10,000 hours of audio programming, all without public accolade or compensation, a case could be made that his commitment to remind God's people of their story and call them home may be underappreciated too. But that really isn't the point. Yahshua is scolding Yahweh for their failure to consider what Yahowah's prophets and messengers have revealed over the years. The truth has been available but not the good sense or the will to read it. As we contemplate everything that has been revealed, beginning in Yeshaya 52 and running through Isaiah 53:3, there are statements which apply to all 3 Zarowa, Moses, Dowd, and Yada, to be sure, but there are many which are beneath and exclude 3 for various reasons. The greatest likelihood is that Yahowah has authorized and empowered the least significant of them to tell his story to his people and remind them of what his son has sacrificed to reconcile their currently severed relationship. 499 introductions made, let's review where we have been before we press forward into the heart of the prophecy. In his own voice, Yahshua, Isaiah, the preeminent prophet, revealed. Who has affirmed this accounting? Where was the truth established? What has been proven? How was it verified and authenticated? When was it revealed? And why has this trustworthy evidence been provided and confidently upheld of, my man, our message, this very revelation and announcement from us, La Shemua and Akdu? Through and for whom, El Mai, have the Zarowa, the productive shepherd and sacrificial lamb, along with the one sowing the seeds, Zarowa, for Yahowah, been revealed and made openly known, Galah. Yashaya 53:1. He will rise and be lifted up, encouraging growth by recording what has happened and will occur to ascend, Allah, similar to, Ka, the sucker, the shoot growing out of the rootstock of an old stump or fallen tree, Ha Yaunek, before his appearance to prepare in advance of his arrival, La Panahu, much like, Ka, the family line rooted, Ha Shorsh, in the land after a long drought, serving as a solitary sign posted along the way by Vin Erezia. His approach will not be perceived as particularly pleasing because he will not provide a superficial outline or a shallow two-dimensional sketch, and what he delineates will not be predicated upon some preconceived physical characteristics, nor will he be distinguished based on outward appearances, lo lahu. He will not hold a high office, be a nobleman or king, he will not ascribe any value to the status of others, nor will he be majestically attired, and he will 500 not seek acclaim or accolades, wahaya lo hada, such that we would look to him or consider what he is revealing as a witness, warahu. There is nothing readily apparent, lo Miqra'ey, such that we would desire him, want to be him, or be pleased by him, wa chamidhu. Yashaya 53:2. He will be scoffed at and ridiculed, dismissed and discredited, held in contempt and censored, called uniformed and disrespected, even despised, bizarre, by a wide variety and a considerable number of individuals who, each, will try to stop him, attempting to get him to cease and desist, wa chadil. Even so, Yada will come to know, understand, and actively acknowledge, wa Yada, the implications of sorrow and suffering, contemplating the cause and consequence of being harmed by, Makob, being plagued and afflicted by evil, sickened by a malevolent and malignant pandemic, Choli. As a result, Ka, its presence Pala, will be averted, muster, from him, Minhu. We will censor him, slandering him as uninformed, unimportant, and disreputable as we scoff at and ridicule him, dismissing and discrediting him, wabazahu, because, we will not properly assess his contribution by contemplating what he has composed, lo chashabhu. Yashaya, Isaiah 53:3. The children of Yisrael would be wise to reassess the Zarowa and garner a greater appreciation for the role Yahowah intended each to play in the lives of his people. In particular, we have Moses as the liberator who disclosed the Torah, Dowd as the Son of God, the 501 shepherd, Messiah, and King who united, defended, and guided his people, who served as the Passover lamb to open the door to Shamaim, heaven. The ensuing prophetic portrayal of the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah, leading to Bikurim, begins with a statement of purpose. This is a challenging translation because the sacrifice must enjoin unyeasted bread with Passover to achieve the specified results, and they were fulfilled, differently. As such, in Yashaya 53:4, the pronoun hu serves to identify Dowd in the initial statement of purpose. Then in Yashaya 53:5, hu can represent he as in the Messiah's body during the piercing experience of Pesach, or it if depicting his physical body. Hu then becomes it when referencing the crushing transition to Matzah because Hu is then identifying Dowd's Nipesh, consciousness which makes the Zarowa aware of and responsive to what his soul is enduring. And while this explanation is sufficient to render the first sentences of Isaiah 53:4 and 5 adroitly, the third statement is problematic in both verses. Dowd's body and soul are both involved in the fulfillment of the initial Miqra'ey, and the contribution of each is improperly assessed by God's people. And yes, referring to Dowd's soul as in it is disquieting, but nonetheless, even the Messiah's Nipesh is a thing, something Yahowah projected to accomplish his son's intent. This, however, gets a bit confusing because, with us, our soul represents us as a person. And since in Hebrew, it and he are scribed identically, this challenge is unique to translation. Surely, it can be verified as accurate and true that indeed, the malignant and malevolent pandemic of twisted perversions which plague and weaken us, Choli and Aknu, the infectious and injurious diseases which sicken us and our religious maladies which mortally wound 502 us by distorting the truth, he will lift from us, accept, and carry away, Hunasa, he, the Zarowa, will, himself, sustain on behalf of the relationship and remove at this moment in time, actually forgiving. Cal perfect third person masculine singular active. The cause and consequence of our pain and suffering, wa makob and aknu, the questions which anguish us and make us miserable and the implications of our grief, from to consider the reasons behind kab, agony and anguish, he will incur and bear them, sable hem, he, Dowd, will pull them away, initiating the process to bear them as if they were his burdens to remove, cal perfect. And yet, we assess his overall contribution as, an aknu chashabhu, we will think and consider him, the Zarowa, cal perfect, poignantly inflicted, naga, demonstrably damaged, befallen, and plagued, cal passive participle, and, from one kiza, stricken, naka, beaten and slain, made to suffer, Hophel passive. The beatings were imposed upon him in a vivid and demonstrable way, by God, Elohim, in addition to being humiliated for his testimony and abused for his response, Anna. Even denied and mistreated for his, Dowd's, answers and punished for his reply, Paul participle passive participle, the object suffers the effect. Yashea, Yahowah delivers, Isaiah 53:4. On Pesach and Matzah the Zarowa was burdened with the guilt of the children of the covenant. Dowd chose to redeem his brethren by accepting the consequence and penalty they would otherwise have been due, while at the same time carrying away his people's guilt so that they would appear perfect before God. The first Zarowa, Moses, would explain the purpose of Passover to the children of Yisrael, recording their experience and Yahowah's instructions in the Torah. The 503-second Zarowa, Dowd, would serve as the prophetic eyewitness to reveal what he would experience as he fulfilled Pesach and Matzah on behalf of Bikurim. The third Zarowa would serve as a herald to bring this to the attention of Yisrael before Dowd's return to fulfill Yom Kippurim. While Choli and Makob are familiar terms, the verbs pertaining to them are different than what we experienced in the previous statement. With the fulfillment of Passover and Matzah, Yisrael is Arkan, assured that the Choli, religious perversions which have plagued them were Nasa, lifted from them and taken away by the Zarowa. Likewise, while Makob, that which was responsible for their pain and suffering was Sable, incurred by Dowd's Nipesh, soul as part of his sacrifice. There is also the reoccurrence of the verb, chashab, to assess, but this time it is not negated and is directed toward Naga and Naka, inflicted and stricken. This indicates that the Jewish people would wrongly assume that the Pesach Ale suffered because God saw fit to punish him for his sacrifice, which is a very disturbing perversion of reality. And yet, so much of Jewish history is stained by the people's collective failure to appreciate the role Dowd played as the Passover lamb. Relative to the sacrifice of the Zarowa, Anna has long been one of my favorite words because its positive and negative implications are so fitting. Anna's primary definition is to reply, respond, and answer, as well as to provide testimony. As such, Yahowah encourages us to Anna, reply to his Miqra'ey, invitations to meet. The implication is that those who Anna, respond to God in this way will be welcomed into his home and family. While that is entirely positive, on the darker side of this proposition, Yahowah allowed his sons Basar, body and Nipesh, consciousness to be Anna, afflicted and abased 504 on Pesach and Matzah. His sacrifice was so that his people could respond to his gift and celebrate by Anna, availing themselves of the result on Bikurim and Shabat. Those who Anna Yahowah are not Anna by God from the perspective of the word's most positive and negative connotations. He will be pierced through, Wahu Chol, it, Dowd's corporeal body, will be fatally wounded by the penetration of sharp objects into the body, then profaned, defiled, desecrated, and dishonored. Halal passive participle, the one suffering endures the effect in an uncommonly brutal manner, for us breaching our relationship through religious and political rebellion, min pasha and akdu, for our national, cultural, and societal revolt, our defiant crimes and transgressions, our insurgency against authority, and casting off our former allegiance, from pasa, pervasive missteps, Paul passive participle. Then he will be separated and crushed under tremendous pressure, Wadaka, he, Dowd's Nipesh, consciousness removed from the body, will be placed under tremendous compression and gravity, corrected by referencing one Kiza, for our guilt because we were wrong, min A1 and Akdu, because we pervert and corrupt as a result of our immorality, iniquity, depravity, and resulting punishment, from Awa, to bend and twist, to distort and pervert. So, Wa, also, from one Kiza, the punishment, Muzar, chastisement and rebuke, discipline and correction, the shackles and chains, will be upon him, Al-Hu, will be on him, the Zarowa's Nipesh, soul, for our reconciliation, Shalam and Aknu, our complete restoration, our well-being and benefit, our tranquility and 505 peace, our safety and salvation, from Shalam, restitution and recompense, payment for restoration. Therefore, by his scourging blows, Wa-Bar Shabirahu, then with stripes from a whip which left him, Dowd's body, wounded with black and blue welts and deep bruising, from Shabat, to league and ally together, to unite and be bound, we will be restored, healed, and repaired, Raphalah and Aknu, we will be mended and made whole, having all sickness and disease removed, promoting complete renewal and restoration. Yashea, Yahowah liberates, Isaiah 53:5. Had this prophetic portrayal of our salvation through the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah not included the two references to the Zarowa, we would not have known that Yashea was speaking of what Dowd would accomplish on our behalf. But with these acknowledgments, we can appreciate how this prophecy dovetails with the 22nd and 88th Mizmor, Psalms, with the Torah completing this portrait of our salvation. Shaul was chosen because it is the perfect word for the occasion. It means, to pierce, and speaks of the penetration of sharp objects into the body which wound, harm, and kill. Shaul tells us how Dowd's body would suffer unto death. It describes the means of inflicting the specific form of capital punishment used by the Roman occupiers of Judea, crucifixion, the torturous murder of the lamb painstakingly detailed by Dowd in his 22nd song, and by the prophet Zechariah. We now have three independent affirmations of the Passover lamb dying while subjected to the form of crucifixion the Romans would invent, with their prophecies written 2 to 6 centuries before Rome existed. When we then combine these three witnesses with what Dowd revealed to Daniel circa 560 BCE, we are afforded the exact day the Zarowa would enter Jerusalem to fulfill the 506 Miqra'ey. Recognizing that multiple copies of all 4 books have been found in the caves above Qumran dating to the 2nd century BCE, we have uncontroversial proof that these prophecies were inspired, affirming that we can trust them. Having made the transition from identifying the herald who would explain this prophecy to our Savior who endured it, we see how Father and Son worked collaboratively to fulfill Pesach and Matzah so that we might enjoy Bikurim and Shabuah. Thankfully, Yahowah loves his family more than he hates our perversity, or this depiction of our reconciliation and redemption would not have been possible. The Zarowa's willingness to endure my punishment to cure me, as undeserving and flawed as I am, is the ultimate gift. And since he endured it, the least any of us can do is accept his generosity gratefully. To deny or reject it is an insult to Father and Son. And for this reason, God despises Judaism and Christianity. Dowd, in the 22nd Mizmor, Psalm, makes it clear that his body was bruised and bloodied, even pierced, by the Romans, but it was not broken. Further, based on the opening line of the 22nd Mizmor, Psalm, we realize that Yahowah's set-apart spirit separated from his Son prior to his last breath. The lamb's body died, was placed in a sepulchre, and then was incinerated later that night. Therefore, while the Zarowa's basar, body was not daka, crushed, it was necessary for Dowd's nipesh, soul to endure the immense gravity of Shaul, hell to redeem his people during Matzah. This distinction is the impetus for differentiating between he, Dowd, and it, his nipesh throughout this prophecy. Since the consciousness enduring all of this came from God's beloved Son, referencing his soul would have sufficed throughout so long as we are cognizant of the respective roles played by Father and Son. 507 The Messiah suffered to resolve min pasha and akyu, the individual and collective propensity to bend and twist, to distort and pervert the word of God. The Zarowa's nipesh, soul would endure the muzar, punishment others deserve for the revolt against the very means to salvation he was enabling. In this way, the relationship with Yahowah Shalom was reconciled. Father and Son did what was required to Shalom, restore the covenant family. His method was through Shalom, restitution and recompense, a ransom payment for reconciliation and restoration of the relationship. As for God's people, they are like sheep following the wrong shepherds. They have become an unruly flock of stubborn goats, feasting upon the rubbish of religion and politics, the mirame of man. Through the self-delusion and the purposeful deception of rabbis, they have stumbled, walking away from God. The consequence of turning to the way of man is judgment, resulting in either punishment or death. Collectively, Shurl, all together, we, and Akdu, are like sheep in a flock, Carhart's own, similar to a herd of goats and migrating animals in a collective, misled and deceived, errant and wandering away, staggered while intoxicated, betrayed, having been misinformed, lost without purpose or goal, perfect, with humankind, people, turning, panna, changing direction and turning, his or her own way, la derek hu. And so, Yahowah, a transliteration of, our Eloah, God as directed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence, will cause the guilt associated with having twisted and distorted the truth and resulting punishment, FA1, with the revolting crime and resulting liability of rejecting the proper guidance for our lives, especially our tendency to 508 bend and twist, pervert and distort reality, of us all, Shurl and Aknu, to be associated with him, Pargabahu, to impact him so that he can make intercession and intervene for us, Hyphal perfect. Yahowah saves, Isaiah 53:6. This is the synthesis of the Torah's promise to provide salvation through the Miqra'ey. The Zarowa was the implement, and that is why the message presented within Yeshaya 53 is so vital for us to understand. Mankind's problems are collective. The larger the institution, the worse mankind becomes. As lone sheep we can be good or bad, playful or mischievous, alert or oblivious. But as part of a flock, we are a horrible lot. The history of civilization is a tragedy. The more people that are brought together by religious practices, political ideology, economic schemes, cultural rites, or conspiratorial notions, the worse humankind becomes. Man's history is plagued with despots and dictators, oppression and slavery, murderous wars and senseless destruction. Gang mentality has brought out the worst in humanity, such that the larger the herd, the more we are deceived and misled. And that is the reason Yahowah inspired Yeshaya to write, collectively, we are like sheep in a flock, misled and deceived, wandering away betrayed and misinformed. As a group, man is Miqra'ey because of our propensity to be lost in Babel. And make no mistake, Yeshaya is using we judiciously. He is speaking of fellow Israelites and Yahudim, not Goim. That is not to say that Gentiles are not lost or that they cannot choose to be part of the flock, only that these sheep have ventured away from their shepherds Yahowah and Dowd. By way of affirmation, the rationale behind Pesach and Matzah is to allow Yahowah, through the sacrifice of Dowd as the Zarowa, to remove yeast, symbolic of religion, from 509 our souls so that we are prepared to live within the covenant family. It is God's one and only plan of salvation. As mentioned previously, the worst of this was not that it happened, because Dowd as a prophet was fully aware of what Rome would do to torture him. His anguish comes from the fact that no one would respect his devotion or recognize his sacrifice for almost 2,000 years. Not one among his people would appreciate what he had done for them. Almost as bad, Gentiles would claim that he was still rotting in his grave so that they could credit another. As great as the anguish of flogging, crucifixion, and a trip to hell would have been, the denial and disregard of Yisrael and the grievous chicanery of the Goim hurt far worse. He will be exploited, nagas, he will be traumatized and burdened by a political tyrant, becoming the victim of the oppressors, Nephil perfect passive, and he will respond by being afflicted while suffering humiliating abuse, Wahu Anna, he will become the answer, allowing himself to be subjected to browbeating and forced to kneel down while being struck, enduring pain and anguish while being mistreated, subjugated and oppressed in response, Nephil participle. And yet, Wah, he will not open his mouth, Lo Patapehu, he will not respond by making a statement to free himself. Like a lamb, Kaha say, that is brought to the slaughter, Laha Tebak Yabal, who is led and directed to being ruthlessly killed, and like a ewe, Wakar Rachel, similar to a sheep, that is silent, Alam, is speechless, before the presence, La Panim, facing and in the presence of, its shearers, Gazaz high, those who cut off and fleece, so he does not respond verbally, while Lo Patak Behu. Yashaya, Yahowah delivers, Isaiah 53:7. The Romans crucified those who were perceived to be a threat to their authority, anyone who might inspire people 510 to revolt against them and seek freedom. Yashaya predicted as much, telling us 777 years in advance of it occurring that the Passover lamb would be nagas, exploited and traumatized by a political tyrant, becoming the victim of his oppressors. And that is what occurred at the hands of Imperial Rome. This is exceptionally revealing because there would have been only one person in Roman-occupied Judea, who would have risen to the level of being a sufficient political threat to the empire within the region to justify crucifying an otherwise innocent man, Dowd. He had not only been Israel's most acclaimed king, but he also fought some 66 battles and never lost one. So, if the Romans were going to murder someone in Yahweh, he would have been the guy. This realization duly noted, the story of Pontius Pilate capitulating to the plot of rabid rabbis, and then washing his hands of the affair, is religious propaganda, an incongruent fairy tale conjured by anti-Semitic Christians to justify replacement theology. For the past 2,000 years, Jews have been traumatized by Christians who have falsely accused them of perpetrating a crime that the Romans were guilty of committing. Yashaya correctly presented what would transpire and it played out just that way. Jews have been accused of perpetrating the wrong crime. They did not plot to kill Dowd, their crime was to deny him. Imperial Rome wanted the king of Yisrael to bow down before them. When he wouldn't comply, they beat him to the precipice of death, torturing the Messiah with their metal-studded whips. They were not only the embodiment of Babel, they were the most monstrous incarnation of the beast the world had ever known. This prophetic portrayal of the Zarowa, sacrificial lamb fulfilling Chag Matzah portrays the Messiah's 511 silence. He would not address those butchering him. He would neither plead his case nor theirs. There would be no conniving plots, no mock trials, no debate, and no Q&A between the potentate of the province and King of Kings. Dowd would say and write nothing at this time. He provided no explanation whatsoever to reveal who he was or what he was doing because he had offered more than enough 10 centuries earlier. This realization is the antithesis of the fraudulent narratives found in the Christian New Testament where Jesus is tried twice, once by high priests and then by Rome's procurator, defending himself on both occasions. So, while the mythical misnomer wrapped in Dowd's accolades opened his mouth, the actual Zarowa, Mashiach, Ben, and Melech, was silent. The reason he did not respond to them should shake the Gentile world to its fabricated core while piercing the hearts and minds of Jews. Dowd had already said it all, and so had his father's prophets. We were told exactly who he was and precisely why he was there. After all, why do you think Yeshaya, Isaiah 53 was written? What was the purpose of Mizmor 22 and 88, Yeshaya 9 and Daniel 9, Zechariah and Malachi if not to explain what would occur long before it transpired? Isn't that the difference between prophecy and history, between inspired and provable versus propaganda and myth? The Messiah, himself, revealed the exact day he would arrive and then explained in excruciating detail what would be done to him. But far more than this, rather than wasting his breath on those who were ignoring him or on the enemy poised to rob him of his sacrifice by misappropriating his renown, the Son allowed his Father to speak for him, prophetically presenting the benefits of what they would accomplish. It was the only sensible solution given the mindset of his people and the belligerence of the Romans. 512 Unlike Dowd's first life, where his contemporary, Shamuel, wrote vociferously about him, and where Dowd augmented this portrait with 100 Mizmor and Marshall, telling his story in his own words, there would be no contemporaneous prophetic portrayal of his fulfillment of the first 4 Modim in year 4000 year, 33 CE. There were no Nabi, prophets by this time and no prophecies to convey. The Zarowa was fulfilling them, not issuing them. This explains why there is such an overwhelming discontinuity between Yahowah's Torah, Nabi, Mizmor and the incongruous and contradictory rubbish we find in the Christian New Testament. Those who spoke for Yahowah were prophets who demonstrated that their revelations could be trusted by accurately portraying future events. And they drew our attention to what was separating mankind from God so that Israel might come to appreciate what would reunite them, thereby directing their focus to Dowd and the fulfillment of the Miqra'ey on behalf of the Berith. Whereas the Christian New Testament is little more than an internally contradictory and historically inaccurate hearsay portrayal of religious mythology which was crafted and then augmented by those allied with the empire torturing the Lamb, who just so happened to be the Messiah, King, and Son of God. Yes, indeed, Dowd was exploited, and afflicted by Rome. As the Zarowa, Lamb, he was butchered by the beast which would become the Roman Church. He had nothing to say to them, they were the enemy. And ultimately upon his return, he will annihilate them. So why waste words on such a vicious and pervasive anti-Semitic fungus? By contrast, what really mattered was for Yahowah's prophets, particularly Dowd and Yeshaya, to boldly 513 proclaim what would transpire during the 4 most important days in human history. Yeshaya had introduced Dowd by name in the 9th chapter, revealing that he was the child who was born, the son who was given, the great Gibeah who would serve as the living incarnation of the Word of God. Now, after affirming that the Chota, Dowd's Basar, herald, would give cowl, voice to this message prior to the son's return, Yeshaya is explaining what the Zarowa would experience and achieve. And as is the case with everything Isaiah revealed, it played out exactly as he foretold. What follows describes the benefits of Pesach and Matzah as an integrated whole to resolve what is plaguing humankind. It is Father and Son who are facilitating our freedom and exoneration. Away from, men, out of, coercion and oppression, being restrained by religion and controlled by political authorities, Otsa, hindering limitations and vexing impositions imposed by human institutions to constrain the public and deprive them of freedom, and from judgment, Wa min mishpat, from being judged and condemned, corrected through one Kiza, he has grasped hold and accepted, Lakek, he has selected, received, collected, and taken, call perfect, with his people receiving the result, which is to be taken away from these things at this moment, his future family lineage, Wa eth Dawahu, the generations of his people and those who are related by birth or adoption, his household, who give serious consideration to, question, and think deeply about, then speak to the profoundly important, my Seth, who, as a result of this information, diligently focus on this content to contemplate, inquire about, and discuss, pearl imperfect, realization that he will be separated and cut off, ceasing to exist, ky gazar, acknowledgement that for an exceptional, and valid reason, he will be divided into 2 distinctly separate entities as part of the plan and thus 514 excluded, Nephil passive perfect, as part of the land of the living, Mineres Chaim, away from the earth and realm of biological life, for my people having breached the relationship through religious and political rebellion, Pesha and Eni. For the national, cultural, and societal revolt of my nation, the defiant crimes and transgressions of my family, insurgency against authority, and casting off our former allegiance, from Pasha, rebellious and revolting nature, plaguing and afflicting him, Naga Lahu, infecting and ravaging him, one Kiza reads Naka, smiting, subjugating, chastising and punishing him while the mount has Naga, assaulting and traumatizing him. Yeshaya, Yahowah liberates, Isaiah 53:8. This begins with Yahowah affirming that the purpose of Pesach and Matzah is to men, remove us from Otzah, being restrained, oppressed, coerced, and controlled by others. Father and Son are committed to liberating their people from Otzah, the vexing impositions and restrictions imposed by governments. God is pro-life and pro-choice as a libertarian. The lone prerequisite of the covenant is to walk away from the confusing, invasive, and integrated nature of religion and politics, leaving Babylon and never looking back. We are perfected by Yahowah when we walk along the path Dowd has provided through the Miqra'ey, beginning with Pesach and Matzah. As a result, his chosen are considered free of these plagues and thus vindicated. Far more than freeing us from the debilitating consequences of politics and religion, Dowd's sacrifice on our behalf, the Zarowa's fulfillment of Chag Matzah, delivers us from Mishpat, judgment. The covenant's children are acquitted, seen as right before God, and thus not subject to trial because of what the Messiah achieved. This is the payoff line of Yeshaya, Isaiah 53. The Zarowa Dowd offered his body and soul to remove the 515 stench and stigma of religion and politics from us so that we would be free from judgment and therefore, enter the covenant. Our Savior grasped us by the hand and brought us into his family. All of this, from Bersith to Malachi, has been presented so that those who give serious thought to what the prophets have shared might be redeemed. We have come to realize and accept that the Zarowa was cut off from the living and separated into Sheol so that we might live in harmony with God. Having breached the conditions of the covenant, we are restored into fellowship in this way. Through his affliction, we are afforded the opportunity to respond to our Father's invitation and come home. The second Zarowa came for his people, to save the children of Yisrael, just as had the first Zarowa nearly 1,500 years earlier from Miriam. This was a family affair, still focused upon Yisrael. Far from justifying the claims made on behalf of the Christian Jesus Christ, this prophecy is eviscerating them. And speaking of Christian nonsense, their Bible publications would have you believe that my, which they correctly translated as an interrogatory in the opening statement of this prophecy, suddenly became a pronoun in Isaiah 53:8. Nonetheless, my asks the question, how is it, and why is it, that he is continually considered and spoken of as divisive, cutting things in two, then excluded from what was decreed and from the realm of the living because of the rebellion and defiance of my people, stricken and killed for this? This is the foundational claim of Pauline Christianity. Paul hoodwinked billions into believing that Jesus Christ divided things into two parts, with an Old Testament and New Testament. Then Paul proposed that the Old was discarded, considered obsolete, and excluded. 516 Even worse, Shaul opined that rebellious and defiant Jews were responsible for God's death, as if God can die or that Rome didn't crucify the Lamb. It was all a paper-thin lie, one devoid of a shred of truth, and so Yahowah is asking this question: do you really believe he was assaulted and afflicted for this? In truth, the Passover lamb came to reconcile the relationship between Yahowah and Yisrael, not destroy it. His mission was to save his people from the likes of Rome and Roman Catholics, not hand them over to them to otzar, coerce and control. What follows is markedly different than what you will read in a Bible published by religious institutions. Most have altered God's words to coincide with the mythology found in their Gospels. They would have us believe that their Jesus died among thieves, but was buried with a rich man. Neither is true, including the absurd conversation between criminals whereby one is told that he will be in paradise with Jesus on this day. The truth is far more compelling. In search of the truth, there are three options for who is doing the Nathan giving in this next statement. In 4 Kezer as well as in the Mount, we find he gave. In 1 Kezer, we read they gave. Finally, the 70 presents I gave. Unless the speaker has changed and God is now conveying this in first person, the Septuagint's rendering is not plausible. They gave is also problematic, because if this is still being presented in Yahshaya's voice, they would be the Romans. He would have used we to address his fellow Jews. According to the New Testament law, Jesus was buried by a Pharisee and attended to by his mother and the women in his entourage, all Jewish. In keeping with the context and the prophet's intent, the one who would be given is the Zarowa Dowd, making this his gift. And this being the case, then we should translate 517 Keber consistent with how it is presented in Mizmor 88. Dowd's psalm was written to specifically address the soul's journey into Sheol to fulfill Matzah. And there, Keber, grave is used synonymously with Sheol, hell, the darkness of the pit of death for those separated from God and forgotten. This would not only be the most revealing way to present Nathan in conjunction with Geber, in this context, but it also cannot be rendered as two more sepulchre because there would be no point to the prophecy. So then, he offered as a gift, Nathan, he actually gave, actively allowed, and genuinely placed with unfolding implications resulting from the gift over time, Kel imperfect active third-person masculine singular, his internment in the depression of Sheol, Geber Hu, his grave cast off in the absolute darkness of the lowest depths of the pit, hidden from God and terrorized, among the souls of the deceased who were separated, restrained, and afflicted there because they were corrupted and polluted by the abomination of religion, translated based upon the two appearances of Geber in Mizmor 88 which details this very moment, to be with the guilty and convicted who were evil, Ethrasha, with those who were condemned for having been wrong, wicked, and in violation of the standard, with bad people and ungodly souls. Even though he will have engaged in nothing violent or unjust, he will act, al-Shamasar, although he will not have done anything to wrong or plunder anyone, he will be, in opposition to those who have accumulated a great many things and who have grown exorbitantly rich through exploitation and taxation, Ashar, so among the people who have amassed wealth by taking a tenth of the productivity, from Ashar, to gain riches and Ashak, through exploitation, oppression, and crushing violence. Derived from treachery and deceit in Yirmiyah 5:27, presented as unredeemable in Mizmor 49-6, and 518 potentially condemnable in Marshal 28:20, from one Kaiser which refers to rich people versus a wealthy individual in the mount, on his elevated place, Bomahu, on his mountain, hill, mount, and ridgeline, aka, Mount Moriah. No deceit or dishonesty, nothing misleading, beguiling, or betraying, while low murmur, nothing fraudulent, feigned, or false, will be in his mouth, Barpehu, will be spoken by him. Yada Yahowah delivers, Isaiah 53:9. When Yada received this prophecy from Yahowah, he would have been keenly aware of what Dowd had written in Mizmor 22 and 88, collectively explaining what would occur on these 2 days. And it is obvious that Yada is expecting those of us seeking to understand his narrative to have done the same. With this approach, we not only come to appreciate exactly what the prophet is describing, we actually witness the journey of Dowd's Nepesh, soul into Shaul, because the Mizmor provide an extraordinary presentation of Matzah's fulfillment. So now, the Basar, herald lets out a giant sigh of relief, feeling vindicated for having presented the fulfillment of Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim in such a detailed and exacting manner. Set against Yahowah's last statement, this loquacious approach should make it possible for more Yahweh to return to Yahowah. They can study this translation and analysis and appreciate when the text is addressing Dowd's Basar, the physical body representing the lamb, and then his Nepesh, soul. This is Dowd's ultimate gift to his people. He took their guilt with him into Shaul, hell, and left it there, never to be seen again. The man who was proclaimed Zardak, right with God and, thus vindicated, would endure Matzah with the most evil among us to find the best in us. 519. And in contrast to those who would exploit God's people, becoming rich in the process of misleading them, Dowd would remain as honest as he was forthright, talking the talk and then walking the walk. As a prophet, everything he said would come true. Reliability would be especially important at this time because according to Yahowah, Chag Matzah is the most important of the Miqra'ey. It is why Dowd, alone, was qualified to fulfill them. The initial 3 modim provide the means for father and son to perfect the covenant family, where, by working together, they remove the stain, stench, and stigma of religion from our souls. There is no alternative, and without this gift, eternal life is served in Shaul. This makes Pesach counterproductive without Matzah. To best understand the relationship between the initial Miqra'ey, recognize that the consequence of religious and political rebellion, which is death, is resolved during Passover by the Zarowa's redemptive sacrifice. And then the penalty for leading others astray and away from father and son, which is eternal incarceration in Shaul, is remedied by unyeasted bread. The Messiah endured that sentence in our stead, perfecting our souls in the process. This explains why Nathan, he placed Dowd's Nepesh, soul in Geber, the lightless depression of Shaul, where those who advanced the corrupting influence of religion are detained forevermore. The Messiah's consciousness was incarcerated among the convicted and condemned even though he was carrying our guilt. Christian translations render Geber as buried, even though that is a verb, so that they can present Ashar as a rich man to infer that Jesus fulfilled the prophecy of being buried in a rich man's tomb. The problem with that theory is that, even if true, not only would there be no way to validate the prophecy, but it is irrelevant where Dowd's 520 body was placed because it was incinerated that night, consistent with the Torah's instructions regarding the remains of the Passover lamb. Moreover, Ashar is not a positive thing. It was used to condemn the Roman Empire, not one wealthy dude with an empty tomb on his hands who was looking for a short-term rental. Ashar depicts the people who had accumulated a great many things and had grown exorbitantly rich through exploitation and taxation. It is derived from Ashar, to gain riches, and Ashak, through exploitation, oppression, and crushing violence. Further, one Kaiser affirms that it is addressing rich people versus a wealthy individual, thereby spoiling the Christian plot. Continuing to miss the point, Christian Babels render Bomar as death to create the impression of another fulfillment, claiming that he was crucified between thieves. But Bomar means elevated place, a mountain, or ridgeline, and was, therefore, addressing the location which was on Moriah. As for low murmur, nothing misleading or beguiling being spoken by him, that cannot be said of the church which misrepresented his purpose to justify their existence. Both sides of this coin are relevant to the Passover lamb. Not only was he to be perfect, but his sacrifice also resolves the betrayal of religion. Now to be fair, religious Jews are no closer to the truth. They deny what Yahowah has done for them, too. Shame on the rabbis. Hell awaits, even though they do not believe in it. What would transpire, and now has been fulfilled, is the result of Yahowah honoring his promise through his Son. Here, we find Yeshaya speaking for Yahowah to state that it was God's preference and will to resolve his people's guilt in this way. And in the Mizmor, Dowd states that the decision was mutual, with father and son 521 being of like mind and in total accord. And yet, no one seems to care about what either wanted or achieved. There is no denying the realization that Yahowah supported his son's choice to serve as the Zarowa, sacrificial lamb. They realized that through the momentary affliction of one, the guilt of many would be resolved forevermore. And yet, it was the will and preference, chafetz, it is the inclination and desire in this matter, perfect, of Yahowah, an accurate presentation of the name of Eloah, God as guided by his Torah, instructions regarding his higher existence, for him to be wounded and endure this pressure, Dakahu, for him to be subjected to undergoing the intensely oppressive nature of extreme gravity. He will suffer injury, be afflicted, and grieve, Shelah, he will be sickened and suffer the debilitating disease of the plague as he is weakened throughout the travail, when, as a concession, the mother, surely in the larger context of an oath performed by the mother, if and when and mother are written identically in Hebrew, she will render, she will direct and appoint, determine and place, imperfect third person feminine, his soul, nipeshu, his consciousness, his capacity to observe by seeing, hearing, and feeling and then responding, to be a reconciling offer to pay the penalty for the culpability and resulting guilt, Asham, as a sacrifice to resolve the consequence and damage of poor decisions, as well as the resulting impairment suffered from being offensive. Then he will witness, he will see, inspect, view, and observe, imperfect, from one Kiza, the result of what is sown, the offspring, Zerah, the seed, fruit, children, and posterity, whose days he will prolong, Arak 522 Yaumim, whose time he will lengthen and maintain, Hyphil imperfect. Therefore, it is the will and intent, Chefetz, so it is the pleasure and delight, the motivation and desire, the willingness and preference, perfect, from one Kiza, of Yahowah, a transliteration of Yahowah as instructed in his Torah, teaching regarding his higher existence, to successfully accomplish this task, advancing the ability to prosper and thrive, Zalak, push forward making progress with overpowering force, sweep in suddenly and victoriously winning the case, being profitable and prosperous. Bar Yod-Hu, with his hand and influence, Bar Yod-Hu, by his direction and support. Yashar, salvation is from Yah, Isaiah 53:10. Yahowah supported his son's decision to serve as our savior. This is because God realized that Dowd's choice was right. The boy who, 1,000 years earlier, had risen to the occasion and toppled the giant menacing his people would earn their trust and respect yet again. He would die and go to hell to deliver Israel from a far more troublesome enemy, themselves. The Dabar, word made basar, flesh abad, served as the Chaim, living embodiment of the Berith, covenant by Holok, walking a Jaibower, courageous and Racham, compassionate Derek, path through the Miqra'ey, invitations to be called out, expecting his people to follow the Torah's guidance, becoming Yisrael, individuals who engage and endure with God and Yahweh, beloved of Yahowah. He did. They did not, at least not yet. No greater love has any man demonstrated for his family. His was the most thoughtful decision ever made, one confidently calculated by the brightest man in the history of our planet. And for our benefit, he was also the 523 most articulate and inspiring. As a prophet, he left a trail of words we could follow. His people would muck it all up, foregoing the benefits of eternal life as God's children, by denying what Dowd and Yashar had written. What I'm sharing with you now has been available for 27 centuries. It was sufficiently clear, and that was ample time, for one among many to figure it out and share it with others. Leaving his people yet another gift, and proving the prophetic nature of this revelation, the great Isaiah scroll was written and preserved 200 years before these promises played out in Yerushalayim. We have had absolute proof that Yeshaya's witness could be trusted since 1947. 3 shepherd boys chasing after some lost sheep tossed a rock into a dark recess. When they responded to the sound of shattered pottery, they discovered this scroll emblazoned with the words that would prove more valuable to Jews than the formation of the nation the following year. There would be 3 Zarowa, prolific writers and shepherds striving to save lost sheep, responding to these events by sharing the story of the boy who flung a stone at a foul-mouthed Philistine and changed the world forever. This is Dowd's story, and it is rationally undeniable. No faith is required to capitalize upon what he achieved. With Pesach, Matzah, and Bikurim working in unison to provide the benefits of the Berith, this connection was affirmed when the living embodiment of the covenant, Yahweh's chosen one, our Messiah and King, volunteered to fulfill the first 3 Miqra'ey over 3 successive days. With his father's support, Dowd, as the Zarowa, offered his basar, corporeal body as the Pesach El on the 14th of Abib in year 4000 Friday, April 3, 33 C. His Nepesh, soul would fulfill Matzah in Shal the following day, Saturday, April 4th of the Yobel year 524. By reflecting upon Dowd's own testimony, we know that after his body was wounded on Passover, his soul endured the extreme gravity of Shal, experiencing the enormous pressure and responsibility of carrying the guilt of every child of the covenant with him into the equivalent of a black hole. He would deposit it there, never to be seen again. By removing the evidence against us, we have been perfected and are prepared to enter heaven. As a tangible expression of his father's support, the Ruach Kodesh, set-apart spirit, our spiritual mother, took Dowd's soul from Moriah to Shaul on the 15th of Abib, year 4000 to accomplish the mission. Laden with our guilt, and particularly the plague of religion, his Nepesh would suffer grievously in hell during unyeasted bread on behalf of our reconciliation. He paid our penalty, rendering us innocent and, thus, perfect in the sight of God. On the 3rd day, the 16th of Abib, Bikurim, firstborn children on the Torah's calendar, the firstborn of his father was released from Shaul by the Spirit and returned to Shamaim, where he witnessed the result of what he had achieved. The lives of his people would be prolonged. More than this, it was the will and intent of Yahweh to assure that the beneficiaries of what his son had sown, would prosper and thrive, achieving victory over guilt and death. As a result of the Zarowa being deployed as the Yod, hand of God, the mission was accomplished and the benefits of the Berith, covenant were successfully delivered. Should anyone question how I came to these conclusions, interpreting Isaiah 53:10 this way, I would encourage them to reconsider the 89th Mizmor, psalm where each of these connections was made. And then crack the covers of Coming Home and listen to Dowd as he makes all of this so very clear for us. 525. To more fully appreciate what occurred on the Mikra of Matzah, it's important to recognize that on Pesach Dowd's body was whipped, pierced, and hung, but it was not subjected to the undue pressure of intense gravity. Therefore, it was Dowd's soul that suffered this indignity in Shaul on the Shabat of unyeasted bread. Moreover, this is what the Messiah chose and God wanted. Our Father supported his Son's decision to endure the worst of Shaul to spare his people. There is no greater act of devotion or display of confidence, courage, and character. Shiloh was selected to paint this picture accurately. Dowd's soul was subjected to the intense gravitational forces we associate with a black hole, the lightless place of eternal separation. It will serve as a prison for demonic beings and the wayward individuals who have allied with them in order to hold them accountable and keep them away from the rest of us. This pronouncement also affirms that, for a moment in time, Dowd's Nepesh was enveloped in the stigma, stain, and stench of religious malfeasance and political intrigue to remove these impostors from Israel. In this way, it is analogous to Moses going into Miqra'ey to remove the children of Yisrael from similar conditions long ago, setting this example. And on both occasions, these two Zarowa did so willingly to serve their people. The Ruach Kodesh, set-apart spirit, who is the Malakah, maternal counselor, our spiritual mother, was tasked with the responsibility of rendering Dowd's Nepesh, soul unto Shaul. She did as directed because father and son had agreed to provide an asham, reconciling offer to atone for the culpability and resulting guilt the covenant's children derived as a result of prior religious and political entanglements. Throughout this presentation of the fulfillment of the initial 3 Miqra'ey in the Yobel year of 4000 I-526 have consistently written Pesach and Matzah leading to Bikurim because that is how they work. When we enter the doorway to life during Passover and cross the threshold of our perfection during unyeasted bread, we are ready to be adopted by our Heavenly Father and spiritual Mother on firstborn children. And this is the very transition being recognized by the concluding statements of Isaiah 53:10. The Ruach Kodesh, set-apart spirit releases Dowd's Nepesh, consciousness from Shaul during Bikurim, firstborn children, allowing the son to return to Shamaim, heaven. While it would take time, ultimately from this perspective, the Zarowa would witness the result of what he has accomplished. He has sown the seeds that will produce a thriving and growing family whose days will be prolonged forevermore. This was God's intent from the beginning, a mission he predicted 777 years prior to his son's fulfillment at a place 777 strides above the sea. Those who answer his invitations to be called out and meet during Passover and unyeasted bread, with an appreciation of what father and son have accomplished, will be adopted into the covenant family. In the previous volume, Mode, Appointments, of Yada Yahowah, we witnessed this all play out from beginning to end over the course of 2,000 years through the eyes of the prophet Zechariah. Remember Yahowah. He revealed. Yahowah, Yahowah, will rescue and deliver, save and protect, Yasha, Yahwehs, Yahweh, homes and households, Ohel, first and foremost, and in the initial phase, Vaha Rishon, so that, Laman, the honor and glory, Tifereth, of the house and family, Vaith, of Dowd, and the splendor, Tifereth, of the inhabitants of, Yashab, Yahushalem, are not surpassed by, Lo Gadol, Yahweh. Zechariah 12-7. 527 On that day, Baha Yom HaHu, Yahowah, will defend, Ganon, the inhabitants of, Yashab, Yahushalem, and have their backs, bod. So it will exist, Wahaya, that the wavering and weak-kneed, Kashal, among them, Bahem, on that day, Baha Yom HaHu, will be likened unto, Ka, Dowd, and the house of Dowd, Wabaith Dowd, will be like God, Ka Elohim, similar to a spiritual implement and heavenly messenger, Ka Malach, of Yahowah, in their appearance, La Panahem. Zechariah 12-8. And it will come about, Wahaya, at that time, Baha Yom HaHu, that I will seek to hold responsible and thus accountable, thereby choosing, Bakosh, to decimate and exterminate, La Shamed, all of, Shurl, the Gentiles, Hargoim, who will have come against, Harbo-al, Yahushalem, source of guidance on reconciliation, Yahushalem. Zechariah 12-9. And I will pour out, Shafak, upon, over, the house and family, Baith, of Dowd, and on the inhabitants of, Yashab, Yahushalem, the Spirit, Ruach, of genuine mercy, compassion, loyal love, and favorable acceptance, Chen, pleading for clemency and forgiveness, Takanyun. Then, they will look, Nabat, to me, Eleni, accompanied by the one who, Asher, they had reviled and pierced, Dakar, and they will lament, being exceedingly emotional, while Saphad, over him, Alhu, as one shrieks, Karmist, when reunited with someone special, making the family whole, Al-Ha-Yakid, anguished, Marah, over him, Alhu, as one despairs, Marah, over the firstborn, Al-Ha-Baka. Zechariah 12:10. 528 Our father offered his son on Pesach, honoring the promise he had made to Abraham and Yitzchak in this same place 40 Yabel previously. Then our spiritual mother rendered his soul unto Shaul on Matzah as an act of compassion so that the covenant family would become acceptable. On Bikurim, God's firstborn son took his rightful place at his father's side. But that is not the end of the story, just the beginning. Shabuah followed, with Dowd being the first to be enriched and empowered. And now, fulfilling Towrah, the Messiah's Basar, herald is announcing the firstborn's return on Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations, the last chance for Yisrael to get right with God. 5 days after the Zarowa's triumphant homecoming on October 2nd as the sun sets in Jerusalem in year 6000 year, 2033 Dowd will reprise his roles of shepherd and king. Returning to Yeshaya's prophetic portrait of our redemption, now that Dowd's soul has been rendered as a guilt offering on our behalf on the Mikra of Matzah, it's time to celebrate Bikurim with its spiritual reunification and relational reconciliation with the Father. In so doing, we find ourselves in the company of the foremost Zarowa, Yahowah's son, the returning Messiah, Dowd. Out of, as a result of and from, the miserable circumstances and vexing challenges endured, Amal, the hostile situation, the exceedingly unpleasant, grievous, and distressing ordeal experienced, by his soul, Depeshu, his consciousness, making him completely aware of his circumstances, such that he is responsive to what he is enduring, it will witness, it will observe and see, Kal imperfect, the light, or, the brilliant illumination and enlightenment, from one Kiza, not in mount, thereby, as such. From one Kiza and 4 Kiza, abundantly satisfying and completely fulfilling what was required, Saba, content to have overwhelmingly exceeded what was necessary, Kal imperfect. 529 And through this knowledge and understanding of him, Wadorth Hu, as a result of being perceptive and discerning regarding him, recognizing and acknowledging the information which leads to comprehension of the relationship with him, from Yada, to know in a relational sense, to be familiar with and acknowledge, Kal active infinitive construct, actively, literally, and continually learning about him throughout time, written as presented in 1 Kiza. And what he has done to justifiably vindicate and validate what is right, Zardak, to acquit and validate, and verify what is correct, my co-worker, Ebedeni, my servant who works with me, from 1 Kiza, the righteous one, Zardik, the means to acquittal by being correct. Will bear, Husable, will sustain and incur then drag off and carry away, Kal imperfect, for many, la harab, for a great number, the guilt they derived from their distortions and perversions, YA1hem, their tendency to be wrong and the liability they incurred from their twisting and bending the truth. Yashaya, salvation is from Yah, Isaiah 53:11. This is exactly as Chag Matzah was fulfilled, and why. Therefore, Yahweh wants us to be aware of what his Son has done to save us so that we are properly positioned to capitalize upon the blessings offered through Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children. This is because his Son deserves our respect for saving us, and his sacrifices are for naught so long as his people remain unaware of what he has provided. This is also the reason that we translate these prophecies, contemplate their meaning, and then share their intent with God's people. Matzah leads to Bikurim just as the Spirit leads the soul back home, from the darkness to the light. Reunited with Yahowah, Dowd's Nipesh has completed what was intended, having fulfilled what was required to redeem the covenant's children. 530 Typically, when we see Tzaddik, right, righteous, and upright describing an individual, it is addressing Dowd. And so, it is once again, directing our attention to the Zarowa's Nipesh, which is seen animating the Passover lamb and fulfilling unyeasted bread. By being Tzaddik, right, Dowd became the perfect choice. With the transition from the darkness to the light, the Ebed, associate and co-worker God wants us to doth, appreciate, the one who has done what was required to vindicate his people from their A1, religious distortions and political corruptions, is Dowd's Nipesh. This means that the Zarowa is our savior, leading the flock astray. The Jewish Publication Society's Tanakh perpetuated the Masoretes' deception with a translation that is completely disconnected from the actual text. Out of his anguish he shall see it, removing soul and light. Hebrew scholars know that Nipesh is soul, not his, as his is hue, but it is apparent that they don't much like the notion of a soul because it suggests that all of their elaborate cleansing rituals and religious attire, their restrictive diets and physical accoutrements are for naught because it's the Nipesh not the basar which matters. On the other side of the shekel, his was Yahowah's Hallelujah moment. All of the planning and suffering had borne fruit. By fulfilling Pesach and Matzah with his beloved son, the one he had called Tzaddik, right was now Bikor, his firstborn, just as he had promised. Yahowah had saved mankind with the man he most loved. It is a result of Dowd's brilliance, that by seeking to comprehend his life and lyrics, we come to appreciate what this remarkable man means to Yahowah. God would have done it all for his chosen one, alone. Dowd was the be-all, do-all, and for all of Yahowah's family, defining what it means to be Yahud, beloved of Yah. He is the lone 531 individual Yahowah said, he is my son, Ben Eni, and I am his father, Wa Eni Abhu. And yet, it was the one who was offered the most who gave the most. God anointed him Mashiach, Messiah on 3 occasions. Yahowah chose David to be Melech, king of Yisrael and then to return as king of kings. He is the Ra, shepherd's shepherd, the ultimate Zarowa, one who leads and protects the flock while sowing the seeds of truth. And then he became the sacrificial lamb. As the Yod, hand of God, Dowd began defending his people when he was 8, slaying the foul-mouthed and uncircumcised Philistine with a single stone. He matured into the Zmak, branch through whom we would all grow and become productive. He was Yahowah's foremost Ebed, servant because he was the epitome of what it means to be Tzaddik, right? There are 3 Zarowa, all important in their own way, but the man in the center of Yahowah's world is Dowd, his beloved. And that is why God announced 300 years in advance of this prophecy, 1,000 years prior to its fulfillment, that Dowd would be his Bikor, firstborn. In this role, David has rightfully earned a disproportionate share of the inheritance Yahowah is offering to the children of his covenant. And therefore, God is celebrating the moment his promise to his son became a reality. This declaration in Yahowah's voice may also suggest that there will be another, someone in a different time, a student of Dowd, who will bring this exclamation point to his people so that they too will understand. If so, he is the same person introduced at the beginning of the prophecy, the Basar and Cowl. His mission is being fulfilled. This is the crescendo of the most important event in our lives. We become right with God and are vindicated based upon who and what we know and understand. 532 regarding the fulfillment of Chag Matzah. Coming to recognize, appreciate, and accept what Yahowah and Dowd did for us on Passover, unyeasted bread, and firstborn children leads to our acquittal and adoption. Dowd's soul endured Shaul on Matzah to remove our A1, every mistake, making us Tzaddik, right and thus vindicated. Returning to first person, the Father draws a connection between his Son, and the inheritance provided to the children of the covenant. Therefore, Laken, this is right, just, honest, true and verifiable that as a result, assuredly, I will allocate and disperse a share, Shalak, I will apportion and assign, allot and distribute, a portion of everything through separation, Peel imperfect, to him and through him, Lahu, at his direction during his approach, for many and in great abundance, Rab, with a significant number of enriched individuals, such that, they will be empowered, Atsum, they will be strengthened and potent, able to accomplish their intended purpose. He will share, Chalak, he will apportion, assign, and allocate, dividing and dispersing, the valued property and possessions, Shalal, that which is gained and is of tremendous benefit, the plunder and spoils taken when the enemies of Yisrael and Yahowah are vanquished, through the orderly succession of events as a benefit of the relationship, Takathasha. To resolve the plague of death, Laha Moeth, as a consequence of the pandemic disease which infects entire populations and at the point of death, he poured out and exposed, Ara, he left destitute and abandoned, his soul, Nipesh Hu, his consciousness, projecting his ability to perceive, experience, and respond. And therefore, with the rebellious and revolting, Pasha, the defiant and offensive, the indignant 533 and disloyal, it was numbered for a time, Dowd's soul, was destined, assigned, appointed, and counted at this instance, Nephil perfect. Thereby, he lifted up and carried away, Hunasa, he forgave, Kal perfect, many who had gone astray, Shetarab, numerous who had been wrong and missed the way, plural in one Kisa. For their transgressions while Peshahem, to resolve their offences and missteps, for the misled in one Kisa versus those who mislead in the mount, he has interceded, Paga, he has intervened to spare them, Hyphal imperfect, he enables their ongoing reconciliation. Yahowah saves, Isaiah 53:12. To which Isaiah 54:1 adds, sing for joy, Renan, rejoice, expressing your appreciation. If somehow, someone, missed what Yahowah had announced previously regarding the way he and his son, the Zarowa, would provide the benefits of the covenant, God has summarized the process. We will inherit our share of the universe because Dowd resolved our guilt. He was counted among the religious in Shal so that we might be disassociated from them and enter Shamaim. He interceded on our behalf, going down so that we could be lifted up. There are those who believe that this statement says that the unnamed individual, who is obviously Dowd based on the description, timing, title, and context, will receive the largest share of the spoil. But the spoiled are gone. Moreover, while Dowd will inherit the earth, he is going to share it with every brother and sister in the covenant. We are family. It is the covenant's purpose to enrich Yahowah's children. It is among the benefits of the relationship. 534 Moreover, Dowd is the ultimate gift, the son who was given to us. He is the Messiah and Savior his people have been seeking. The beloved is the benevolent leader the world has long sought. His mizmor are replete with the right answers. And he is going to return, clean house, remove the trash, restore the land's former grandeur, and welcome a remnant of Yisrael back home. This will occur at the proper time, predetermined to coincide with the fulfillment of Yom Kippurim, the day of reconciliations in year 6000 year, October 2, 2033. It is then that the days will be prolonged as we sail past year 7000 year, and into infinity, just as the 7+1 formula of Sukkah suggests. All the while, we will be camping out with our Heavenly Father. For this return to Eden to occur, the Chatter-Rab, erroneous nature of the many missing the way must be expunged from the earth. And it is the great defender of his people that Yahowah had designated for the job, the greatest of the Zarowa. Sing for joy. Yahshaya's soaring prophecy explains the nature of, and the reason for, what would occur on Passover and unyeasted bread, leading to firstborn children. The fate of everyone's soul rests on these events and a person's willingness to accept the solution Father and Son provided. These revelations prove that Yahowah inspired his prophet because this eyewitness account explaining what would occur was written 7 centuries before the events described were manifested in Roman-occupied Jerusalem. The specificity of the prophecies, and the exactitude of their fulfillment, reveal how we should interpret unfulfilled predictions. God is precise and he selects his words with great care so that they reveal profound truths. When we view Yahowah's word as a whole cloth, we come to understand that there is just one story, that of God facilitating a relationship with mankind, doing the heavy 535 lifting with his Son. The 7 invitations to be called out and meet provide the way home, a journey that Father and Son personally enabled at a tremendous cost. Observe Passover and unyeasted bread so that your soul is included in the harvest of firstborn children.